Why I make music?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Honestly, it's the feeling. It really is something that, I don't know, it's one of the only moments that I feel like I can naturally shut the whole world out. And there's a high component to it where nothing compares to it, where it's just like, I've had friends talk about it's channeling and you're just, something is moving through you. And I think that's the closest way of kind of describing what that feeling is like. And yeah, it's addictive. I'm a huge nerd, so there's so many aspects of it that you can like dive into. Like, as you can tell, I'm a huge gear nerd, like spend way too much money on it, but it's like endless, it's bottomless. So it's like, I don't know, it's a multifaceted thing that just at the end of the day, it's a feeling that you cannot replicate or chase. In the beginning, I was kind of the only one that just like wanted to play all the instruments, and when practice was over and everybody was kind of like hanging out, I was like, oh, let's do more, like let's keep on writing, let's like figure out how to do a song like this. Whether I was getting home from school or I had the weekends or vacation, whatever it was, I was just in my room all day figuring out, listening to my favorite producers, favorite artists, and then getting like really mad that my stuff didn't sound like that, and then just trying to work backwards of like, how can I be better? How can I figure it out? What are they doing that I'm not doing? I think this year has been quite intense I did a bunch of albums. I was in London for like 3 months. I was working on Lava LaRue's album, and then came back here and then flew back the next week for Rachel Chinriri's album. And then I came back here, and then I had like a couple weeks before I locked in with Ecstasy for his album. But usually I have my core people that I work with. This year especially was like way more focused. And now that I'm out of the album world, it's kind of getting back into friends who are on tour or friends I wasn't able to have time with. Now it's like, okay, now it's time to lock in. Deb's working on her album, Deb Never. So I'm making up for lost time and kind of getting back into that world as well. What makes a good producer, I would say, at the end of the day, it's how much can you, capture an idea and enhance it and bring it to life, but also how can you not get in the way of it? I think it's how well you can adapt to whatever is being asked of you. And how can you create an environment in which people are comfortable and willing to share in? And once you have that, and you have this idea and this feeling, it's like, how can you push it to its limits and enhance it and help it grow, but also you don't kill it and you don't turn it into something it was never meant to be. I think at the core of it, it really is essentially just listening and then just making sure that your intention is right when you're approaching it. Usually my favorite time of any session is just like the first hour or 30 minutes that it is just catching up with somebody and just finding out like what's going on. Sometimes they're off tour, they're exhausted, like I don't know. It's a never-changing thing that keeps it exciting for me because you never know what is going to come up. And then going back to the channeling aspect of it, you find that you start talking and then there's all these weird synchronicities that start occurring and popping up, and it's like, oh, I was just reading this, and it's like, oh, actually I just read that too, and it's like, oh, I just watched this movie that had this character and that reminds me of this, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, something starts formulating and coming together. So as long as you don't ruin that, I think you're doing a good job. How I feel about gear is, I think, first and foremost, you don't need it. I think it's the simplicity. People have made hits with the bare minimum. Like, there is the excuse of, if I get this will be better. Or, if I get this, I will be better. No. I think, for me, gear is... It's been an obsession, because again, I am a nerd, and I like the tactile nature of it. I like the idea of taking something that's just a voice and then all of a sudden it's being run through tubes and transformers and electronics, and then it's binary, and then it's in your computer. It's so strange, and that's a science in itself that I have no idea how that shit works, but I love the process of that, and I love the idea of having something that has a history to it of like, oh, this person's voice went through this guitar solo went through this. Like, I love that idea and how like it adds a lore and a story to something that seems, you're just looking at it, it's like, oh, it's just a rack unit, just like one little thing sitting on the desk, but it's like, no, this has been across all these records, across all these songs, and it's kind of like this unspoken hero that's part of everything. And for me, it just makes things fun. There's randomization, there's defects, and I think that's also something that we, especially in music, you strive for perfection, and in pop music especially, but with certain builds, like one of the famous, the 1176 Blue Stripe, that was a manufacturing defect that made one model incredible, and then now they've emulated that one defect because it was a sound that was great. And I think it adds the ability to be unique because of just problems with shit. and like, yeah, it's, again, an endless thing for me, but I think you have to catch yourself where buying gear does not make you better. It can make your life easier in terms of the signal quality that you get. But yeah, I think if you can do it with less, great. For me, it makes me happy. I love messing with it. I think it makes my life way easier. But yeah, it's you want stuff that's reliable. You want something that you know, I'm gonna get this if I use this. And as long at the end of the day, it makes my life easier, I don't have to do as much work in my computer, that's great. Love it. Demos from October, demos from September, like every month there's so much creation. And it's just a great way to organize it. I can search it by artists, by genre, whatever custom tags I put in there, I can really have pretty much complete control over how things are organized. In sample making processes, it's like, oh, this one has a sample I need to clear, or this one is just guitar, this one's just drums, that I can immediately filter through. It's just, there's so many aspects of it that I really love. If there are any edits, if I bound something wrong, if I made a mistake, I can just swap out the audio. I'll just go into the settings, files and formats, and I can just swap the audio, where I don't have to go through re-uploading it, I don't have to go through renaming it and reorganizing it. Wherever that song is, it'll just repopulate with that audio. It makes life so much easier.